Sometimes Nancy, it's all yours.
Sometimes I think he has a mean streak.
Nah.
Can I remove this from here? Like just a floating head, you know? First things first, is there anyone here who lost somebody or who might be a little disturbed by the story I'm about to tell? If you start having feelings, feel free to leave the room. I'm not offended by that. This is not for everyone. I'm being told, hold the mic up to your mouth. September 11th was a beautiful day. I got up 4 o'clock, like I always did. Jumped into the shower, and I was very fortunate. My mother was home visiting, staying with me from Puerto Rico. And I had the opportunity to sit and talk to her a second before leaving the house. And many Latinos have this custom. When you walk into a house where there are seniors, you say bendición. And you say that when you leave. And what you're doing is you're asking the older person, in this case, my mom, for her blessing. And she said, bendición, and I headed out the door like I always did. And I was driving in, you couldn't miss it. The weather was perfect. In September, it starts getting very cool in New York, but it was warm. And the sky was like a perfect blue, even. There was no clouds. And I thought of playing hooky. So I'll turn around, I'll spend the day with Mom. But I couldn't. Every Tuesday, I ran a support group for one thing or another. And it happened that Tuesday, I was running a support group for officers who had been involved in shootings, who perhaps had been shot, maybe had killed someone, had been beaten up. And I had 2 people in the group that were survivors of bombings. So I went into work, I met up with my partner for the day, Kevin, and he was another sergeant. And we went to the church that was located right across from headquarters where we worked. And we went into the basement. We had been given that space to conduct our groups. And as the guys came in, they would have coffee and we'd talk a little bit, and we sat down. And we were waiting for the whole group to gather to start. And there was this huge boom. And if you've ever heard when a garbage truck comes and picks up a dumpster and picks it up and turns it over, that echoey sound that comes from the metal, except that this lasted. It didn't just stop. It echoed. And the building, although we were in the basement, it shook. And that vibration, you just felt it run right up your legs. And I turned to the guy next to me. His name was Joey. He was from the bomb squad. I said, Joey, I think they're calling you. And, you know, he just shaking his head. He said, Sarge, this is not good. This is not good. And he got up and he ran out. Immediately, I regretted saying that to him, because one thing that, as a supervisor, you are is responsible for your personnel. And he got up and he ran. And I could do nothing about it, because Joey was about 6'4" and measured about 3 of me across. So I could jump on his back, and all I was going to do was go for a ride. There was nothing I could do to stop him. That would haunt me later on. Turned to the sergeant that was with me. I split up the guys. I was senior sergeant, so I'm kind of bossy anyway, so I started giving orders. I split up my guys. He took one group, I took another. I said, we're going to step out of this basement. We had no view from there. We were in an alleyway. So you're gonna go that way, I'm gonna go this way. I was going north, he was going south. You identify what it is, you come back, you do not respond, you come back to the spot. And we did exactly that. From where I was, I could see nothing. But when I got to the corner and I looked to my left, I saw people on the west side pointing up in the direction of the towers. So we caught up to where they were. And the north tower had a huge gash in it that looked like a smile. And there was smoke, just very lazily flowing up. But the weird thing was there were flames too, and they didn't go up like I was used to seeing flames go up when I'd see a fire. They were going down. And it was just so opposite to everything. It's such a beautiful day. The blue was so perfect. You'd want to do wedding pictures. And these flames were doing something so different. Everything was a harsh contrast. We stood there for a second, and it was like, okay, back to where we were. And we gathered everyone up. And we have, within the police department, we have levels of mobilization where we call people out to respond to an emergency. And I knew we were at a 2 or a 3. We go up to 4, 4 being the highest, where they call you in from vacation, where they track you down with hound dogs and drag you in by one leg, even from your vacation. I knew we were at a 2 or a 4, rather a 3 or a 4. I said, let's get this thing going. You guys back to precinct. My partner, Kevin, wanted to run down to the towers, but we were in civilian clothing. And when you're in civilian clothing, you do not listen, people do not listen to you. They listen to you when you're in uniform. And when you're 4'11" like me, they barely listen to you then. So my guys split, supposedly back to their precincts. And there's always 1 or 2 hammerheads, right? 2 of them went down. One wound up with scratched corneas. The other one wound up having hurt his back carrying someone. That I found out later on. Kevin and I headed back to headquarters. I lost him in the crowd because it had become like a Godzilla movie. There were people everywhere. Some running, some walking, some frozen, but there were people everywhere. And I made it into headquarters, but I never saw Kevin again. I looked behind me, and why is he not? We were like 2 steps away from each other. And the World Trade Center was like at least 4 blocks away, and I said, this little devil, you know. But no, actually, they had locked down headquarters. I made it in. They left him out. And he wound up having to do traffic duty, so he was okay. He turned out okay. But I didn't, once again, I didn't find that out till later on. I went upstairs. As I was changing into my uniform, we had co-ed locker rooms, if you can picture that. Putting on my uniform, the 2nd tower got hit. And now police headquarters shook. And all I could think is, we're sitting ducks. Stepped out into my office, and my civilians were going crazy. We had a large cadre of civilians that worked with us. They were, you know, crying and screaming, and I dismissed them. I sent them home. I figured I'd take the flak for that later on. And I thought everybody had left the office, and I looked around, and I said, oh my God, I'm here by myself. But in a corner was a very young police officer who had gotten the job she had because Mommy and Daddy had arranged it. They had been on the job too. And I just looked at her, and I kind of twisted my head in one direction. She got up and followed. And we ran right into my twin, another sergeant that I know, that the joke in the office was if we stood on each other's shoulders, we didn't equal a whole cop. But those 2 women to me were braver than any man that worked with us. You see, when you work in an office setting, a lot of the cops that work there are what we call house mice. In other words, they don't do the streets, but the 3 of us happened to have come from the streets. We were not scared of patrol. We were not scared of working with the community. And we headed out. We were told as we were leaving headquarters, you're going to muster, you're going to meet up with everyone on the corner of Vesey and West. Vesey and West made no sense to me because those corners were the exact corner of the North Tower. But we figured When we get there, we'll see what there really is going on. And we headed out, and we looked at the buildings. All we could say is, tactically, we'll do this, we'll do that, but whatever we do, we are not going to separate. You know, and it was from that moment on, it really was about getting civilians to keep moving, to move north as we try to make our way. We were actually walking west, but we figured north was the safest way to send them. Get civilians to move north. And we would run into friends along the way from the building. And it was like all these officers would stop and hug each other. Like, be careful, you know, be on the lookout, watch where you're going. But it felt more like you were saying goodbye. It was a really, really weird feeling. So with that, you know, you looked at the buildings and you saw this debris coming down from the building, and what we thought looked like paper and cement and whatever else and glass. As we looked at it, as we got closer, it became something else. It wasn't just paper, debris, and glass. We started realizing that it was people. Not a little bit either, a lot. We got to our muster point, and we suddenly found ourselves in front of the worst show on earth, because you could do nothing about them. So you're completely trained to save lives. You're completely trained to intervene and to make things better. And you stood there helpless. You had your gun belt, your gun, your cuffs, your bullets, your nightstick, your flash, all this equipment, and you could do nothing. But as you looked up, you know, for those of you who are in the medical field, you know in an emergency situation, when you feel you're in danger, your eyes become very sharp, your hearing becomes even sharper. You see, feel differently than when you're in a calm situation. And your eyes became so sharp, you can see people in the windows. From the ground up, you could see people filling the windows. And you watch them make the very last decision of their lives. Burn or let go and jump. And what would happen was that, let's say you were on the 70th floor and someone from the 90th let go. Then everybody from the 90th down let go, because that one person gave them all permission to go. And then it would slow down. And then another wave. And that went on and on. And what you saw on TV was nothing like what we were living at that moment. And said, as a child, I had been told if you fall from that height, you go unconscious, you never know what happened. And that is so not true. It was contrary to everything I thought. I had these memories from something fed to a child, and now as an adult I was facing and realizing, that's not the way it is. They came down kicking and screaming. Those legs and arms were clawing their way back to the building, and of course that never happened. And all you saw was clothing. There was nothing in it upon impact. It was just piles of clothing and some color and the sound. I could still hear it. So somebody, you know, we were all talking and we were realizing no one's giving instructions, no one's giving orders. The whole department was so overwhelmed, we didn't have bosses to tell us what to do, and we were very disciplined. You do what your boss tells you to do. You don't pull it, or rather, you don't. I was about to say something really bad. You don't. I'm in church. You don't make it up as you go along. You follow orders because you're going to have to answer to someone later on. Finally, someone said, look, there's a radio truck, and those of us who worked in headquarters didn't have radios, but the officers who were there, by then it was a level 4 mobilization. It means 1 supervisor, 10 officers from every command in the city. Every command, that means every precinct, that means every detective squad, every homicide squad. It was all hands on deck. And we got there and we had no clue. No clue. No one was really organizing us. But someone said, look, there's a radio truck, and your radio is your lifeline. Your radio is what tells you what's going on, where to be, what to do, who to help, and how to call for help. It's everything. So we waited for the radio truck to start assigning radios. We were standing on a subway grating. In New York, the subways have these gratings in the sidewalks so they can let off steam and air can circulate and all sorts of other stuff. And suddenly, the subway grating started to vibrate. And I thought to myself, who the heck forgot to turn off the damn trains? Why bring more people into this area? You know, I was confused. But then the sound came. And we had been warned earlier by the FBI there were other planes missing, the ones who wound up in Pennsylvania and in Washington. But we didn't know that was going to be their destination. We just knew that there were planes missing and they were possibly coming at us. So when we heard the sound, we started the planes, and it wasn't the planes. Suddenly from the other end of the block, it was a strong male voice, didn't need a microphone, just completely screamed, "Run, get the heck out of here." Of course, he didn't say heck, but it was such an alarm, such alarm in that voice that you did not question it. We turned and started to run. And that moment I had looked up, and the very top of the South Tower had like bent. And then it kind of started to fold into itself. And there was no way, I did not know that they were built to implode. I thought, this is it. When this thing comes down, we're all gone. And we started running and pushing civilians and pushing each other. And some officer had dropped their radio. Jeanette, the sergeant that was my side, she saw it, she scooped it up like an athlete. It was like a beautiful thing to see, and then everything went black. It was the cloud of debris you all probably saw on TV. And you started feeling debris hitting you. And you say to yourself, this is it, I'm going. I'm done. I'm gonna die now. And I saw my life flash before my eyes. What they say about that is absolutely true. And I saw myself kissing my mom goodbye that morning. And that was enough to bring a lot of peace. I was happy. I had had the opportunity to say goodbye to Mom because she was never there. I mean, she lived in Puerto Rico. And I felt good. And I said, okay. You know, you start bargaining with God, though. And just don't let it hurt. I'm good. I'll go, but don't let it hurt. I didn't want to die trampled or something like that. I wanted to go quickly. And with that thought, I started seeing light. And you know how they say you walk into the light, there's this tunnel. I started seeing light, and I said, wow, that was quick. This is good. Then I started seeing City Hall in front of me. I said, heaven is City Hall. And honest, this is what's going on in my head. But I heard Kristen to my right say, Janet, Nancy, and then the other side, Janet saying, Nancy, Kristen. And then I called out their names, and I realized they're in heaven with me too, but it wasn't heaven. What happened was we managed to run out to where City Hall is. It's a very big open space that leads to the Brooklyn Bridge, and all that cloud was being sucked out in that direction. So we were no longer in the cloud. And you kind of get your wits back, and I'm going to tell you now what I remember as having happened, but there's video that shows different. That I recall, we wound up on the other side of City Hall Park, and within minutes, the other tower came down, and this big black cloud started rolling towards us, and again, we turned and ran, and it was about half a block to the corner of the park, and I said, that's enough, I'm not running anymore. You know, started seeing cops run past me, and I dug my heels in, and I started pulling them in. We wound up with a crowd of about 10, 15 cops. And other cops were starting to run by, but they see the group, and they stopped. And before you knew it, we had like 50 cops. So we did what we knew we could do. An inspector came out of the crowd, and he was filthy dirty. He has 2 streaks. You could tell he'd been crying. He came out of that cloud, and he looked at us, and it was almost like the tears rolled back up in his eyes, and he became all manly. What is this? What's going on here? Well, boss, my brain only tells me to hold him here. You tell us what you want us to do. And we held up traffic. And in the middle of all that, this man did what he only knew how to do, what came natural to him. He yelled at me. So where's your hat? I didn't answer what I wanted to answer, but I said, where do you think it is, boss? And that was the end of that. And we controlled civilians and emergency apparatus so they could get down to where the towers were, which no more than 2 blocks away. We held that spot for a while. And then one of the captains I worked for found me out there. They had been looking for me. He says, we need you to go to the hospital. Now this is way later on, time has flown by. And I wound up at a hospital where an officer who had been found wandering on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge with no shirt, no shoes, no gun belt, but he had a shield in his hand. He was just wandering around. I had taken him to a hospital. I said, look at me, I look like a giant dust bunny. You want me to go to the hospital? We have a unit with how many people you want me to, and they made me go to the hospital. I was not feeling right, but I had to go. And that young man had watched his partners go into the building just as they come down. His partner had passed away, but I didn't know that at the time, neither did he. I had no answers for him. He just cried on me. And finally, I separated from him and gave instructions to his family, to the nursing staff, got in the car and went back to where my team was, and finally found a phone that worked, and I called home. And I talked to my mom. She was very worried. My neighbors were at the house keeping her company. And she said, but I know you're okay because I see you on TV a lot. Mom was 80 years old. And you know how they keep running the same loop over and over again? Well, she kept thinking it was a different scene. And that was okay, it worked, it worked. I got released at 2 in the morning. I went home, I had to turn around by 6. And all my neighbors came downstairs in pajamas. And when I pulled up the car, my car was full of dust, I was full of dust. It was all hugs and kisses, thank God you're here. And it felt so good to be touched and to confirm that you were alive. Next morning, I got up, went into work. They gave me my assignment for the day. I had the morgue. I spent the day opening body bags, looking for cops and looking for firemen. And a body bag is longer than 6 feet, and usually pretty full, and these body bags were nothing like that. They were folded in half, some of them were just maybe 12, 15 inches worth of stuff. It was whatever they could put in a bag. And you opened it up and you moved stuff around, and if there was cloth, you looked for ID. And if it was something you can recognize as a uniform, you put it on the side, they tagged it and tried to verify later on. And that was my entire day. In the days to come, I was in charge of the mental health of all the officers who were there from the time of the first impact to the time the towers came down. The other officers who came later or who perhaps were more out on the perimeter, they were taken care of by other people. And I debriefed more than 1,200 people. It took me into January. And in January, by then I was nasty, I was mean. I hadn't taken care of myself because I was taking care of everyone else. And one day I got into a really bad argument with my boss, stepped away from her office, got to my desk, and I looked across the distance from about here to those doors, and all I could think was, I can get her from here. I'm a good shot. The minute that went through my mind, I said, I need help. It took 7 years of treatment to work through the post-traumatic stress disorder, to learn how to manage it. It's uncurable. I live with it to this day. In August, Myrna will tell you, I get cranky. It lingers. The moral of the story is take care of things in a timely fashion. But there were other things that came of that, and I was just telling someone this morning, I want you all to know, the number of people that came out to help us, the care packages, the pallets of water. Some people came up from Kentucky with these huge barbecue things and cooked for us in the middle of the street. The love that was shown was phenomenal. And I was telling someone here this morning, I had gotten a phone call from a young man who I ran into here in Florida at a college, and he says, "I know you." He had haunted me all day long, and I finally turned around and said, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" He says, "I know you. I was a little boy in New York on September 11th, and they marched us out of a daycare center, and we walked right by you. You were on the corner of West, and it wasn't Vesey, it was another street." And he remembered. And he called me this morning crying. In the past 15 years, this is his reaction. Imagine a child who lived through that, who saw it, who peeked at it, who was part of it. What an incredible memory. And that hat that I told you about, well, landed in the truck bed of some construction worker who has his own story to tell about 9/11. And he tracked me down. He was calling me. He wanted to return my hat. I could have cared less about my hat. I told him to keep it, but it was so urgent for him to return the hat, he mailed it to me. And eventually we did meet. He was a construction worker. What did I think I was going to meet? Some big guy, big muscles. No, he was my twin. Looks just like me, Myrna saw him. Sounds just like me. And it meant the world. 5 years later we met. It meant the world to him to sit and talk. His wife told me on the phone, "He talks to you every day." And I said, "Oh, okay." He's not doing okay. He's not well. Well, what he did was he took my business card out of my hat, and it had my home number. That's how he was able to get me. And she says he puts it on the dashboard of his truck every day, and he leaves work. He says, "Nance, nothing's going to happen to us today. We're fine." And then he puts it away, and he does not move the car until he does that ritual. We become really good friends. So many lessons, so many side stories to this that I think about. And I'm glad to be here. I'm thankful every day I'm alive. And when people tell you, well, that's because God had other work for you, I wasn't quite sure what that other work was going to be. And then Pulse happened. And I understood completely. And again, I'm surrounded by love. And so is my community. And I cannot thank you enough for all you've given, for all the support, and for who you are. You're all special. And I get it. I get it why Barton stands up here and he smiles at you. I don't know how many of you get this view, but you're gorgeous. Well, maybe some of you not. But you're beautiful. You smile. You can see the responses on your face. And I'm deeply grateful. So thank you for hearing this.
And I just am hopeless. And then there are other times when I see the acts of other human beings and their courage, and I'm in awe. Jesus once said, "There's no greater love than to give your life for a friend." And the reality is there are Nancy Rosados all over the world. We have a strength and a power within us that is so overwhelming. It's our job to discover it. It's our job to employ it. It's our job to live it. So go from here today, living your strength and your power and experiencing the divine in you and sharing it as abundantly as you've received it. Go with peace and purpose. Amen.